Welcome to part 4 on this series on DAC VR deals. We touched briefly on deal stacking. Basically, that's that property that says add on to an existing allowance, and those allow it to stack. And just to kind of recover the overview of that a little bit, both deals or all deals involved must be set to yes to add on to allow the stack to occur. But in this session, we want to focus on the VR deal tracking, and then we'll do an additional part after this that sort of ties up some of the other loose ends on the menu and gives you a glimpse of what's there. There's a lot to deal tracking, so let's just jump in and look at that. I'm going to jump over and pull a session up onto my screen so we can look at it. So you've got 3 points here. You have work with deal activity. That's all about tracking. You also have this older legacy report, deal tracking report, which is pretty plain Jane. I recommend you do not go there unless there's some reason that you find something short on type 6. Menu option 6 is where we put all of our efforts for things. We've left option 5 on the menu just because as a backward compatibility effort. And then in the fifth segment, we're going to kind of talk about these these 3 last items in here. So let's talk about deal tracking. That's what we want to discuss in this session. So let's take option 3. I'm going to show you a couple of things here. So once you set a deal up, tracking starts to happen, whether it's tracking selling side or purchasing side. It tracks and records get created, and we're actually doing a screen view of those records. So you can obviously restrict by a deal or vendor type. Of course, you can press F4 to search for things. You can search for certain types. Remember in our types that we had before, like B types, for instance, and find those. Another thing, when you're looking for tracking and you want to see actually things that have accrued some dollar value, here's another way to go about this. So I say, show me anything that has over $100 worth of accumulated value to the distributor. And so you'll see that. And when you see these rows, I kind of want to go over this section down here. So you'll see the vendor. You'll see a deal description, this from and the start and end dates, the dollars that have been accumulated so far, and the status. And I want to talk about the status for a minute. On this screen, you can select for export and do things of that nature. I do not recommend you use that path because there is a more recent, more modern version of that, which is much better. So I would suggest selecting for export from here is not the best practice. On the vendor billing menu, which we'll show in another series, there's a way to actually import from these tracking records, and that is much better because it handles the multi-vendor deals. Start and end date is better all the way around because it's another take on that. So you have a dollar, you have this status, which is open, and the main thing you wanted to show relatively new, these entries here. So this is a total record count. Actually, this on the right hand side, total record count for the tracking records, and then how many have been exported to vendor billing. And so you'll see, so if you come in here and you're looking at things, you see this one has 294 records collected, but no records have been exported to vendor billing. That's a tip off that you should probably go over to vendor billing and pull those things in. As I look a little bit deeper, let's just zoom in to an entry. Also, the edit pay, same thing as the select for export. Much better to handle this in vendor billing, which has been added as part of the system. It used to be an extra module. It was assimilated over a decade ago. Much better way to do things. I see I have a little pop-up message here. I'm going to get rid of that. So let's do a Z to zoom in. I'll show you some raw details. So this is kind of a header level. Let me get my cursor on the right spot here. If we zoom in and look at the records, so these are each individual record. They are the result of a line item, since this is a B-type deal, a result of a line item that got posted out of orders to feed the records in here. And you'll notice these out here that have a red X. That means though that record has been exported to vendor billing. That's what that's what that is about. So you'll see each individual record in here, and then you can zoom a level deeper if you want to see the more information. So you'll see this record was done here. It was that particular deal. This record was created as a byproduct of this particular invoice. Actually, this is not a B type. This is an R type. So this would be a rebate type of an arrangement based off of what the customer pays for the product. You can see the accumulated amount, the quantities, and so forth, the date it was done. So this is really getting down to a granular level of detail of what's in there. And the screen is handy if you just want to spot check and see some things, see how things are moving along. Obviously, a little hard to digest all the information in a screen program, but it is a good handy, just let's go take a look and see what we've got type of function. So that was option 3 on the menu. Really, when you get down in there, you want to see the information in a little bit better format. The best way to do that is to use option 6. Option 5 will print a report. That's all it will do, and it doesn't do as much as option 6. So let's focus on option 6. The deal recap report has, as you can see, there are a lot of parameters, a lot of properties that can be set, a from and to date, the manufacturing vendor, as opposed to maybe the vendor that you buy from. So the manufacturing vendor, let's say that might be Hershey, and the actual deal vendor might be set up, for instance, under Dot Foods or somebody like that. So you have both vendors are tracked in there, and this is a way to subdivide. It's a good idea if you have a deal that's set up for multiple vendors, just to leave the vendor blank, unless you want to take a multi-vendor deal and just extract maybe Hershey versus another vendor that may be in it. The manufacturing vendor is the best way to subdivide those. And also you can say, yeah, I want to restrict to a particular customer or a collection of customers. I want to restrict to customers that are tied to a particular salesperson. I want to look at a certain deal, restrict to a given warehouse, things that were the result that came out of a pre-book number, and that would be an example of S&T type deals, typically, or where you're concerned about pre-books. On the printed report, do you want a page break by customer so you can tear it apart? Do you want to do a deal item summary where it doesn't break out the customer level information, it just summarizes for the entire deal by item? And most importantly, the newer features that were added in the past several years, the ability to email it as a PDF and the ability to email it as CSV data to open up in a spreadsheet. So let's just show you a couple of things here. First of all, on the deal number, I like to come in here and start down here because it will populate some things for me. So if I F4 search for a deal, and maybe I want to do deal 89, that might be a way to go. Now, remember on this selection, you can use start and end dates, deal types, vendor number, or search by description. So you have a number of ways to find what you want. But once you find what you want, do the X to select. That'll pull it back in. And look what it did for me. It pulled up the vendor number that was tied to the deal. Whether I want that or not is a question depending on how you've set the deal up. So I'm going to blank mine out before I run something. But it also defaults the start and end date from the original deal itself. But if you want to just do it for a section of that, maybe I just want to do for the month of December, or pardon me, September, then I could put a September date range for this old deal in here, and I could extract just the transactions that applied within that. So having the date selection allows you to sort of subdivide. By default, it's going to pull everything it can find out of the tracking based over the default date range, but you can manipulate these numbers. And like I had mentioned before, I like to blank the deal vendor number out if it doesn't really mean anything in particular to me. It's just cleaner to do it that way. So when you process that, if you say, for instance, email as a PDF, then it's going to do some things, or email as a CSV. Now, it's probably the best thing to do is to do either the PDF or the CSV. If you need both, run them one after the other, because I think if you say yes to both these, you'll get the PDF but not the CSV. And typically people are not doing both at the same time, but both entries are available on this screen. I'm going to go back and F4 prompt again. I'm going to reselect this deal just to tidy up and get my default date range back in. So if I tell it I want to email as a PDF, I'm going to press F6 to submit. Now this is also a printed report, and you can, I believe that whenever you run it as a PDF or a CSV, that the printed report does not come out. Those should be hidden. If you don't say yes to either of those, then you will get a printed report that will go to wherever your normal printouts go. But I'm going to run this just for fun, F6, and show you what the results would be. So because I said email as a PDF, here's what will happen. Press F6, confirm, prompts me for email address. So I'm going to send it to myself. All this does assume that you have DAC email enablement set up on your system. That's a one-time charge. If you don't have it, boy, do you need it, because we do a lot of things with email, and you really need to have that enablement set up on your system. So if I run it like that, it's going to produce the report and do some things for me. And I'll show you what the end result looks like. So let me just pop up from down below. Let's see, the PDF looks like this. And so you can see as you look through, basically it's just a copy of the printed version of the report. It will break down. So if you need to send as proof to the supplier, if you're getting bill back money, this is a way to do that. We'll break it down by customer. You can also run that variation on it where it's just a summary by deal, by item, where it's not breaking out to the customer level. A little more digestible. You'll see my email just arrived. A little more digestible for the vendor, unless they want to see each individual customer to run that summary version of it. Also, on the Excel spreadsheet end of stuff, I did a little bit of minor dress up to this, but if you want to get it as data that you can crunch and manipulate and play with, this does basically the same thing, but it's in a spreadsheet friendly format. You'll notice I've frozen my top row up here and done a couple things, but essentially it's the same information broken down. There are some subtotals that show up here, and so you have those possibilities to operate on. So that wraps up the deal tracking end of things. So a lot of different ways to do it, and the results of those tracking we will ultimately send over to vendor billing. Actually, we will pull them in from the tracking into vendor billing. We'll show that in another series. And then ultimately you can take the vendor billing and create vendor receivables where you can keep track of when you actually were reimbursed for things like bill back money, things of that nature. So that's going to wrap up this segment. Thanks for your attention. Stay tuned for part 5. It's going to wrap up this basic menu, and we'll see you there. Thanks.